In 2018, there was a total of $1.7 billion in crypto wealth lost worldwide as a result of scams and theft. Don't be another victim. Use Base Zero, the world's most secure institutional crypto storage solution. Base Zero. Protect against theft, fraud, and accidental loss. Learn more about our integrated hardware and software solution that financial institutions use to safeguard cryptocurrency. Base Zero.
What is Base Zero? What is the offering? What are y'all doing? What are you solving that other people aren't quite getting right?
Yeah, so what we've built is a cold storage solution designed specifically for institutions. So it's based on-chain multi-sig. We use offline key holding devices, and it's from the ground up designed for institutional custody of crypto assets. And we support a range of them, Bitcoin, Ether, ERC20 tokens, XRP, and more. And it's a good combination of the best level of security that you can get with being pretty easy to use. So we've tried to be really uncompromising about both of those things and be very strict about what you can and can't do with the system, but also make it very accessible so you don't need to dig too deeply into the technical details.
So from a user standpoint, what does your system look like? Can you describe it to our audience?
Yeah, so it has two parts. There's a software and a hardware component to it. The software component is a pretty normal looking web app, which you can use to create wallets and to make transactions. And then there's a handheld device, which you use for the actual signing of the transactions. And that's where the key material lives and where it stays. So use those two together in order to execute multi-sig transactions to move funds out of cold storage.
Now, in your devices that you talk about, you have a web app and you also have a mobile app. But the real key here is air gap signing. And I'm hoping if maybe you could talk to us a little bit about why you designed it that way. And it's something that you guys are doing very well. And I want to see if you could talk a little more about how your system actually is doing these signings and what's the advantages through this air gap signing. And by the way, some of our audience might not know what air gap means. So,
Okay. So air gap means that the device in question is never connected to the network. And in our case, they don't even have radios. So there's no Wi-Fi, there's no Bluetooth.
Not even USB.
Not even USB. And the point of that is that most attacks do come through the network. So by keeping the device cold, by keeping it off the network, the secrets that it's holding are protected. And we don't really want to be a hardware company, but when we looked around, there wasn't any hardware easily available which had the right characteristics for us. So we ended up building our own hardware. And the hardware is constructed out of commodity components. This is important. When you build hardware that's highly specialized for cryptographic purposes, people can see that. And folks in the supply chain can say, oh, that's a Trezor and it's going to hold cryptocurrency someday. So it would be worth my while to modify it so that I can attack it in the future. Our hardware is built out of completely off-the-shelf standard components. So we have a standard display, a standard CPU card, and a standard camera. So it's difficult to identify which ones would go into a crypto device. We put them together and build an offline signer. The signer is where we generate the keys, and then the keys are held only in the offline signer.
Cool.
One of the things that the advantages that we have there and what's different about what we're doing is that this is very much a product for institutions. It's not for consumers. So people aren't kind of just downloading something from the internet and trying to do it themselves. We're working hand in hand with our clients to get them set up and make sure that they follow a secure protocol for doing this. It's a comparatively easier problem to secure something that you virtually never use. Mm-hmm. So you only need those backups in a disaster recovery scenario. So you can lock them down. You can keep them in very secure locations. The problem comes when you actually need to use those keys to sign something. And so that's why we have these two parallel systems. We have the device, which you can use to sign as often as you need to, and the backup, which you keep separate and almost never touch. But how we use this in practice with the Shamir secret sharing is that since our system is based on multi-sig, there are actually several keys, and each of them need to be backed up. So people will do a scheme like, let's say that there are 3 keys, and each of the 3 key holders creates 3 shares of that key. So there are 9 total shares, and then they'll exchange them. So each person has one of their own shares, one of the second person's shares, one of the third person's shares. And so alone, they can't construct any keys using those shares, but that any 2 people can actually construct all of the keys.
That's an interesting way of doing multisig.
Yeah, and so it mirrors the 2 of 3 multisig quorum in the backup.
Okay. That's an interesting way of doing it. And I assume that the multisig lives on a smart contract on Ethereum or some other platform. Where does that live?
That depends on the cryptocurrency in question. So Bitcoin has multisig built into the protocol itself. Ethereum, we use a smart contract. And in Ripple, they added multisig into the protocol itself as well, but it wasn't in the original Ripple protocol. A little more about the Ethereum smart contract. There have been a lot of Ethereum multisig contracts, and some of them have had trouble.
That was my next question that I was going to lead to.
Yeah, so we got on board. I can't remember the guy's name, but the name of the contract is the Simple Multisig.
Christian Lundqvist.
There we go. Thank you. But the philosophy is to do the absolute minimum necessary to generate multisig behavior. So we can send funds and we can make contract calls, but we don't implement the hundreds of other features that people put into various multisig contracts because we feel that the attack surface or mistake surface is too large. So this contract's quite small and it's being used by a number of people. And so we feel like it is more secure than the more complicated ones.
Okay. But it was very important to us to have all of the multisig operations actually enforced by the blockchain. There are a lot of other systems which are using, say, Shamir secret sharing to manage the actual signing key. And then there's only a single key on the blockchain, but each party is holding a share of it. Whereas in our case, it's true multisig enforced by the blockchain, regardless of which cryptocurrency you're using.
Cool. So getting a little more into the product and what the user experience of that product is like. I'm a institutional user, and I'd like to send money to someone else, whatever, customer, another bank, whatever. I'm trying to transfer this. I'm trying to execute a transaction. What are the steps I would take using your system, and what makes them so unique?
Yeah, I'll use the example of a cryptocurrency exchange, which everyone will be familiar with. Exchanges keep most of their funds, around 95%, in cold storage, and only require about 5% to be in an operational, like, online wallet for distribution. And so someone in the exchange will determine how much of an asset needs to be withdrawn from cold storage in a given week or period of time, and will log into base 0 and create a transaction which transfers those funds from the cold storage wallet into their hot wallet. That's just an unsigned transaction at this point. It specifies what the destination is and the amount and so on, but there are no signatures on it. It can't go to the blockchain. It's just a record in our system. And then each of the authorized signers for that cold storage wallet receive a notification that says, hey, there's a new transaction that needs to be signed. And then they log in, they can see the transaction in their browser or on their phone. And when they're ready to sign, they use their offline signer device, and they actually scan a QR code from the web application that contains the unsigned transaction. And then, and this part's really, really crucial, the device actually it fully decodes the transaction and displays all of the details on the device. So there are a lot of more consumer-grade key management solutions out there, which they'll protect the key and allow you to sign with that key without exposing it, but it's hard to tell what you're signing. So we display the full transaction on the offline device where you can trust that it hasn't been tampered with, and then you decide, okay, this looks good, I'm going to sign it. And once you've done that, it presents the signature again in the form of a QR code. You hold the device up to your phone or laptop to scan it, and you're done.
And it's really cool. It looks like a little Game Boy. Like you've got like a little game console or a Game Gear or whatever. It's like a little device that actually has a screen and an interface. It tells you everything that's on there. It's extremely extensible in that respect, and that in the future you could totally add features to this device because of the nature of it has its own visual input and visual output, basically, because you can read in from the camera and you can output on the personal screen, and then it can also output to another system from the screen through the air gap. I think that's really neat in that you can add more rich features if necessary. So it essentially could technically become a development platform.
Yeah, we've already extended it in a number of interesting ways, including you can configure an address book, a whitelist of destination addresses. So in an institutional context, when you're transferring from cold storage, typically you're not sending to a million different places, but you'll transfer to an intermediate hot wallet and then manage from there. So if you're only transferring to a few places, we help you to make that secure by actually keeping track of what those addresses are offline and validating that and warning you if the address is not one of the expected ones.
Can we talk a little, maybe shift gears a bit and talk a little bit about the business case of catering to the institutional investors, and like what is that market and who are the clients? Why is it so big, and why did you build a business around it?
Yeah, well, the world of financial institutions has really taken notice of cryptocurrency in the past couple of years, and a couple of things have happened. For one, there's a lot of demand from their clients to offer services related to cryptocurrency. There are opportunities from investment and in their regular financial operations to leverage cryptocurrency. And also has been a great increase in the amount of value in cryptocurrencies. So at the same time, we have institutions who see a big opportunity, are working with relatively leading edge technology that they may not yet have deep expertise in, but it's very important to keep it safe and secure. So we try to enable both what we call crypto native institutions who have kind of started out in the crypto world, but also more traditional financial institutions who are expanding into cryptocurrency. And we see demand on both sides of that. And for institutions who have been working with crypto for a while, they've been through a couple of booms already, and they may have felt comfortable keeping their assets secure, using a consumer device or even something homegrown. But then a couple of years ago, it 10x'd in value. And now suddenly that feels a little uncomfortable, and like they may want to take some stronger measures to mitigate their risk.
So how do you sell this to them? You guys are actually going out and making something, selling that thing, and then selling the services around it. This is a very, very, very classic business model for the IT space. And it really does fit well with the existing kind of way that lawyers and business managers are comfortable in interfacing with an organization for bringing a product in-house, if that makes it, using it internally. They're not as comfortable adopting an open source platform that is negotiating money around and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They're very comfortable with purchasing a highly secure device, sticking it in, dealing with those kind of provisioning those devices, granting access to particular entities for those devices, and then having a very consistent purchasing model around that. With token sales, for instance, they don't know how to negotiate something that has a fluctuating value or anything like that. You guys have an actual. You could cost out your system. You could tell them exactly how much things are. You could tell them how many they'll need. You could tell them how much they'll need if they needed to expand. These are things that they can plan around. So I find that very interesting in that it's very friendly to these institutions just by default, just by the way it is. And so I was wondering, what is like the sales like? How do you interface with these people? How do you discover how do you identify potential customers? And what is their reaction to the fact that you guys can actually support their existing models? I'm sure they're very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that there are a few reasons why we went that route. One of them is, as you pointed out, it's easy for them to interface with us that way. Okay, this is a software product. We buy it, we license it, we use it in the traditional fashion, and so the engagement is pretty clear and simple. Also, where our expertise is in technology. We don't come from the world of finance. We don't have a big compliance organization. We're engineers, and so we're building what we're good at. We'll work with financial institutions who have expertise in that world to solve their problems as related to cryptocurrency. And the third reason is that we really believe in the transformative potential of cryptocurrency, and that in order to really realize that potential, institutions need to be in control of their assets. If you are going to try to do sophisticated types of trading, for example, and do transactions in ways that aren't possible with traditional financial instruments, you need to have your own keys. You need to be able to sign transactions. Whereas if you're entrusting your assets to a third party and saying, okay, please hold on to these for me and I'll come back when I need them, you may not be able to do those things. If you don't own the keys, then the cryptocurrency isn't really in your possession.
Does that mean that because you're a non-custodial solution, do you not have to offer insurances or guarantees around the product or service?
Well, of course, we offer assurances and guarantees around the product or service, but they're around the functionality of the service. So, for example, we have a service level agreement, and we provide attestations about the security of the product, that it does exactly what we say it does. Since the customer is actually the practitioner, they're holding the keys. They need to store their backups in a secure location, things like this. So we do our part, and the customer does their part.
To that end, has the educational aspect of teaching best practices to your clients been difficult, easy? Explain that.
It really depends on the background of the institution. We talk to folks who know this stuff as well as we do. And we also talk to those who are very new to cryptocurrency and need a lot of education. So that is a big part of how we help our customers, to make sure that they do understand those best practices and are able to apply them.
Yeah, the education part is probably the biggest part in some sense, because what we're seeing is migration of traditional financial folks who know all about finances and regulation and so on and so forth, but the technology aspects of key custody is new to them, and it's very different than anything they're used to. We've been getting some help from the smart custody folks. So this is Blockchain Commons. Christopher Allen is one of the principals of this group. And they're doing workshops which teach people the fundamentals of custody. The first workshop just was last month, and it was for personal custody. So it had a set of advice and directions and techniques and technologies for individuals to store their own crypto securely. The next set of workshops are for small trusts and then eventually institutions. And they build on each other. So you have to kind of understand the personal level custody first before you move on to institutional level custody. But we strongly encourage folks to check out what Blockchain Commons is doing with the smart custody initiative, because they're really pushing the right stuff. It's important to understand all of the challenges and details of this when you're picking a solution. So we need our customers to be informed in order to understand why our system is better.
Yeah, because key management in general is not restricted to cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency kind of brought it to the forefront, especially as it starts to become the background of how financial assets are managed. Key management in terms of holding things that are valuable that's digital is a problem that will continue to be a problem forever as long as we have the internet.
Yeah, and basically the practice of applied cryptography is about reducing information security problems and privacy problems and things in that sphere, reducing them to key management problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the root of all these solutions, there is still a key management issue, and that's the part that we're aiming to solve.
So you have these devices. This is something I'm not quite sure of. Is that a SaaS service, or are you guys? Can an institution deploy that internally so that they're in full control of your system, kind of an internal only installation of this, or do you guys keep it kind of centralized in the fact that you have this proposing system that you own and you control?
Yeah, so there's an online side and an offline side to the system, and the web app, of course, is part of the offline side. We also run a fleet of full nodes for the various networks that we connect to, and all that infrastructure is multi-tenant. So all of our customers can use it, and we get some economies of scale from that, and so it's relatively low cost and straightforward for them to use it that way. It is possible to license that system to run on premise, but we've very intentionally designed this system so that the security properties are such that it's not critical for that system to be trusted. It's basically passing messages back and forth between the offline signers and the network. And so even if that system were compromised, someone hijacked that web app, someone got the login password to your base zero account, they can't sign any transactions. They can't touch the assets on the blockchain at all. They might be able to try to trick you into something, but there again, that's why it's important that we show you exactly what's going on the offline device. So let's say that someone puts a bogus transaction into your base zero account and says, I want to transfer all of your assets into my account instead. The device is going to show you right away that that's actually what's happening. And so the choice that you're presented with is not yes or no, but it's saying, here's what's about to happen. This is the exact transaction that's being proposed here. Do you want to sign it or not?
So that leads me to kind of something else. When you have this website that people are interacting with, and you have a tenancy, meaning that you know who those people are. So they're associated with a whitelist of addresses, or they have addresses and then a whitelist for addresses they could send to. You know who is associated with a particular address, meaning that you can actually measure the flow of assets going in and out of this particular institution. Is there any sort of security risk or security protections around protecting that particular data? Which is why I thought maybe an institution would prefer an on-site version of your thing where they can actually control that in-house rather than having you guys be in control of that particular data.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we do have that option. But again, the way that systems like this are used in practice in an institutional context, those transactions are mostly internal. So you're moving funds from this cold storage wallet into this hot wallet and vice versa. And so they're not exposed to as much transactional information as you might assume based on the proportion of funds that are there. These are bulk movements of funds in between institutional wallets for the most part.
In a lot of ways, we're going to do much better than what's currently happening. So today, most folks know the cold storage addresses for most exchanges. So large positions moving in and out of cold storage on the exchanges are visible and announced, and everyone talks about them. Based on using the key derivation paths that we have, we don't have to reuse addresses. So when an exchange accepts a new deposit, it won't be linked to existing exchange cold wallet addresses. They would use a fresh address. So we think we're doing much better in terms of leaking information to the world.
Furthermore, it's also a matter of how much information you're holding and have access to, which creates a honeypot for people to then try and get into it and find that information. Based on the use case, you don't have high throughput of transactions, which means that it's more difficult to create address entities through doing forensics on these keys and the flow of money through them.
Yeah, and our focus has really been on ensuring that you can do these transactions in a secure way. I think there's a lot of interesting developments happening, such as Collin and we saw at the Stanford conference, especially around more zero knowledge proofs and constructs for doing anonymous transactions and private transactions. And we'll continue to stay abreast of those, and we certainly support more privacy-centric chains in our product, like Zcash, but that's not the part of the problem that we're aiming to solve right now.
That's kind of what I wanted to ask next is where do you built this solution and a business around it because you think it's going to be useful in a broad amount of use cases in the foreseeable future. But what do you see in the foreseeable future that gets you excited? Is there something that you're kind of planning for but isn't here yet? Is there something that is here but no one's talking about it that you feel will be a larger portion of the market?
Well, it may sound a little heretical to say that in this environment, but I'm actually really excited for the traditional financial institutions to really get more involved in crypto, because I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting innovation that comes from that. And there's already regulatory frameworks that are in place for good reason in order to protect customers and institutional clients of these institutions. And we help them to apply those same kind of protections and even better ones at a crypto level. So as those institutions are kind of joining the crypto world, we're helping them to onboard and to adopt best practices. Yeah, so we think that any institution that is going to be dealing with cryptocurrency will in the future need to have control of keys, and that in order to realize the full potential of cryptocurrency and crypto assets, that has to happen. So this won't be only something that, say, banks and hedge funds and exchanges need to do, but that regular corporate entities, which have a treasury today in the form of, say, a business bank account, will also have a crypto treasury, and that they'll want to manage that in many cases in-house.
So let's just say this takes off. Okay, you've already got some customers. Let's go the hacky path. People really like this. The people who are using this right now are very impressed. Your customers are very happy. You're starting to get traction. I already see that. I saw it at SBC. I know that you're aggressively going out and showing this. The happy path is you suddenly have a huge book of customers that need their orders fulfilled. Part of the interesting thing about your story is that you're still small, but you need to scale. How do you plan on scaling the operation of actually physically developing these devices?
Well, right now the most important priority is security. And that means we have to be careful with outsourcing the assembly. By focusing on high-end institutional customers, the number of units that we have to make is not overwhelming right now. So the current optimization is to build the devices where we can see them being built, know where they've been, know who's seen them and who's touched them, and can guarantee that when we give a device to a customer, we know it hasn't been in a bad place.
Yeah, and I think in the long run, there will evolve other kinds of devices which are able to perform the signing operation and have the characteristics and capabilities that we need in a device. As Ken mentioned earlier, we're building a custom device just because it's hard to find something that has a good size capacitive touchscreen, has a camera, and doesn't have any radios in it. Basically, every consumer device out there is going to have some kind of networking in it because that's what makes it useful. But in our case, we're in this strange position of actually wanting a negative feature there and making sure that it's not networked.
I think
the general purpose computing components is actually even a harder constraint, because there are some solutions where people can build custom things, but then again, the supply chain attacks become, if you order 1,000 of those from another country and they arrive in a month, who knows where they've been?
I think people don't quite realize the amount of connectivity that normal devices have, and how a lot of people who deliver quote unquote secure devices that have very limited functionality mitigate or kind of get rid of all their guarantees because the hardware that they use has a tremendous amount of I/O associated with it, meaning that they may only work through various input and output channels of the device. It actually has Bluetooth and all kinds of other things you can access that get around all the security measures they put around the things they actually use.
Yeah, this is we see this a lot, and there are a lot of projects, and they have their applications, especially for individuals who are not securing a large amount of funds to repurpose, say, a mobile phone to use as a key management device. And it can have a really nice interface. It's a good form factor. It's convenient to use and store. But it also probably has 4, 5, 6 different types of radio transceivers in it. And we just don't feel that that's appropriate for an institutional context. Yes, you can not put a SIM card in it, or you can not connect it to a Wi-Fi network, but where are you placing your trust? How can you be sure, especially and with so many components being able to be packed into such a small form factor, can you really be sure what's enabled and what's not, and what's open to the internet?
Yeah, obviating those security problems by just never having them as an issue in the first place. It makes you not have to you don't have to worry about it if you literally can't do it. And that's a very good way to guarantee that those things can't happen, is because the device simply can't do it.
Yeah, we've been through that interesting transition with with a lot of data privacy things, to where the problem used to be, how do you keep all the data, and how do you keep it backed up and make sure that you don't lose it, and collect as much of it as possible. And now a lot of institutions are saying, well, what information do we really need, and how short a time can we hold on to it for in order to minimize our risk?
So what's the most interesting thing you learned about the space when you started getting into this project? What was kind of surprising about not just institutions, but just building these kind of things in general?
Well, it was surprisingly challenging just to, I think, bootstrap a business in this space, because a lot of the infrastructure isn't really there yet. As a couple of examples, like setting up a business bank account for anything to do with crypto turns out to be kind of a hassle. There are a lot of institutions that, without knowing anything about what your actual product or service is, just the fact that you're in this space is like a warning flag for them. And it's very difficult to advertise your product. As a software company that's working with cryptocurrency, tools like Google AdWords that are completely standard for all kinds of other industries and products often just are not available to you. And that was a bit surprising.
So what are you most excited about in this space, and how do you see your wallet kind of or I don't want to call it a wallet, but your signing system, I guess, is tying into that?
Well, we're continuing to see just an explosion in the number of different crypto assets and experimentation with different chains and different types of consensus algorithms and different types of financial instruments that you can build on top of these. And some of those are just kind of replicating things which already existed, say for fiat currencies and other financial instruments, and doing that for crypto. But we also start to see things that couldn't exist with fiat, and some of the things you were talking about in your last episode with payment channels and ways of moving funds around in real time with very low fees on a global basis. And I think those things are incredibly exciting, and the opportunity for us as a business is to really provide a comprehensive platform for institutions to participate in that whole ecosystem. It's quite a lot of work to keep up with all of the new developments in this area, and we hope that we can make that easier for institutions to participate in, because definitely some of the most exciting stuff is still yet to come.
So because you guys are multi-currency and multi-tenant, it's pretty much just exchanging one asset for, so like Bitcoin for Bitcoin, sending those around. Is there any way to maybe link so that you can actually exchange Bitcoin for Litecoin, Bitcoin for Ethereum, and et cetera, or do you have any plans for that on the roadmap?
So we currently don't have any plans to become an exchange, but exchanges are awfully interesting, and they're our primary customers. So we're very, very interested in ways that we can facilitate transactions through exchanges.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting idea.
Good to know.
Roger that. I got the smile of, yeah, we're looking into that, but we can't talk about it. Okay, got it. Cool.
So I guess that's a great way to wrap up the episode. And is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we didn't ask you?
Just to mention that our website's got a white paper with some of the details and the justifications for why we've built things the way that we've built. And we've published an article to Medium recently as well. So I just want to invite everybody to come and check out those resources at basezero.com.
In 2018, there was a total of $1.7 billion in crypto wealth lost worldwide as a result of scams and theft. Don't be another victim. Use Base Zero, the world's most secure institutional crypto storage solution. Base Zero. Protect against theft, fraud, and accidental loss. Learn more about our integrated hardware and software solution that financial institutions use to safeguard cryptocurrency. Base Zero.